Hi and welcome. And I am so pleased to introduce this short series of videos, which are a kind of summary of the behind the scenes stuff that's been happening with the entrance to the Hanging by a Thread exhibition that's going to be mounted in September 2020 by WAFTA, the West Australian Fibre and Textile Association. So I've just finished talking to the last of the 7 wonderful women who agreed to be interviewed for just a few minutes about the major challenges they've been facing in the making of their work and how they overcame them. And I'm sure you will really enjoy listening to them, and there'll be lots of things that you relate to as well. So enjoy, and I'll see you later. Bye. Okay. Hi, Jan.
Iris.
So, Jan, yes. Now, just if you can tell me, this is in preparation for the WAFTA Hanging by a Thread exhibition. We're all lined up here waiting to have our stuff photographed, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to interview a few people about one challenge that they've had and how they overcame it. So there you go.
Well, my challenge was trying to put fabric and knitting in the same piece without the knitting having to drag down from the weight of the material. So I tried fishing twine to start with. I threaded it through all the side of the knitting and across the knitting. It still didn't work. It still buckled and distorted the shape. And I was getting very frustrated. I also tried organza and perhaps pinning it onto other fabric, but then of course you don't see both sides. And then I was using a retractable tape measure, and I thought, oh yes, I could use that. I'll try that. So I made some sleeves to put the tape measure in. That was a pain because I had to then turn it inside out. And then put the tape measure in, and consequently it worked. So
Great.
I overcame the challenge.
Well done.
Is that enough?
Good. Thank you, Jan. Welcome, Darren. Thank you for agreeing to do this little conversation. This is going to be about the piece you're making for the Hanging by a Thread. So now, we were just talking earlier about challenges that you've run into with making your piece. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, there were a few. I guess the biggest one really was imposter syndrome. Being this the first time that I've done anything on this scale, or probably, I guess, the bit that really was tripping me up was in this sort of company. And so deciding what I was going to do and then actually getting going on it, I was kind of tripped up a little bit by that. And also that I had a plan and I started and I got partway through and it just was not happening.
Okay.
And so then I had to make a new plan and basically start all over. But yeah, I was much happier with the second.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, imposter syndrome is quite a challenging thing, isn't it, to get over? But you kept going, so...
Yeah. I think as women, it's almost part of the package, isn't it, for most of us? Yeah. But yeah, I guess the fact that I'd made a commitment, and I'm not really one to go back on commitments, that was meant that I didn't really have a choice but to keep going and ultimately face it, probably when it's all hanging in the exhibition and I can see how it looks.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sure it'll be fine. Yeah, I've seen your work before and it's just beautiful. It's so intricate what you do. It's so well made.
Yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed the process of making and the process of, because I had a deadline, a commitment to work at it, not just think it's a one day, I'll do it sometime. I had to really keep going at it, which was really gratifying to see it all come together at the end. And it's going to be really awesome to see it hanging in a bigger space.
Yeah, it'll be fantastic. Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Darren.
No worries.
Good.
Thanks.
Welcome, Rowan Rovere. And I'd love to have you talk about the challenges that you've had, or one main challenge that you've had perhaps with your work for the Hanging by a Thread exhibition?
Well, I think the principal challenge I had, it was committing to do a 2D piece in the first place.
Okay.
Generally, I work 3D, but I take my commitment seriously, so I gave it a lot of thought. And then the second challenge I had was size. My ceilings are only 2.9 metres, not 3 metres. So I have yet to find a space where I can hang it because I need to obviously see how it hangs before I submit it. So that was a second challenge. And I suppose for me, everything's a medium and everything's a textile. So I tend to interpret the name of an exhibition quite literally at first. So hanging by the thread, for me, first it was spiders, that sort of stuff. And then I had to look at it in a more metaphysical perspective. But there has to be something very literal about the translation of what I make to what I'm thinking. So sometimes that can be texture or technique. So I don't stick to any one particular thing. And so this is the first time I've actually worked with wire.
Okay.
And that was quite a challenge. So bending wire, 4.5 metre lengths of wire into faces was quite a challenge.
Gee, I'm looking forward to this.
So, and also writing artist statements. I'm absolutely hopeless at it. Although, this one actually flowed really well.
Good.
So I actually wrote a poem about it, which I'm quite happy with. But yeah, I suppose everything is solvable. Every challenge you have is solvable. It's just about how you think about it, really. And I don't like to repeat too many times what I do. So I'm always looking for a new medium or a new technique or things like that. So that's always the challenge, is how to find the right things to illustrate what I want.
Yes. Yeah, so what kind of wire have you been using? Is it very flimsy or is it?
No, quite. It's a bit thicker than a coat hanger wire.
Wow. Okay. That's getting tough.
Like you've got very strong hands.
Yes.
So yes, it was quite a challenge, and also metal has a memory.
Yeah.
So often when you bend it, it will sort of want to go back. And so my piece, you'll be able to trace in one line from beginning to end. Sorry, I've just got to hang up on this. Go away.
Good music.
Trying to ring me. Yeah, so you'll be able to trace the whole piece from beginning to end in one line. So then the engineering of how to do that, none of the lines are crossed, none of them intersect. So then trying to put it together to make sure the stresses on the wire didn't actually misshape the piece. So that was quite a challenge as well.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. So, yeah, and you haven't seen, I can see why having 2.9 metre ceilings is not enough to even kind of get a feel for it, because if the wire's quite rigid, you can't really.
Well, I've actually joined it together with nylon, fishing line, which is the same diameter, and then I've wrapped the whole lot in raffia. So.
Whoops.
For a while and see.
Sorry, Rowan, you just froze for a moment there. So can you go back to, you wrapped it with raffia?
Yes, I wrapped it with raffia, but the thing is I have to hang it to make sure that the joins will hold.
Yes.
So I have to find a place, and because it's wire and their faces, if I put it outside and it gets windy and they start blowing everywhere, they could catch onto each other and get tangled. So part of the process, I know Belinda Kay, the curator. I think she's fantastic. But I've also kept in mind, as I've created it, what is the best way to make it so it makes it easier for her to hang it.
Yes, I'm sure she'll appreciate that.
So I've made a rod out of perspex, and then we can clip all the bits onto it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like. I mean, how much of a challenge is it going to be to actually move it, to carry it from your place to the exhibition?
I haven't quite got to that bit yet.
Okay.
So the fact that I can actually dismantle parts of it is helpful. But as I'm talking to Belinda, I said to her, can I come, on the day that you want to hang it or lay it out on the floor? Because if I leave it in something, the nylon will kink.
Yes.
Because nylon also has a memory like metal does. And that's where I'm more concerned, is if the nylon kinks too much and then when it hangs, the pieces catch onto each other. Because it's more like a kinetic sculpture in a way, but two-dimensional. So it managed to, by doing it that way, I managed not to compromise who I am, but fit the brief.
Well done. Very good. Well, I'm absolutely intrigued. I'm so looking forward to seeing this. Just sounds really, really interesting.
Well, I really like the challenge of having to do things differently, and using mediums I haven't used before. I always enjoyed that. So,
excellent. Yeah.
So, what else would you like to know?
Well, I was just interested because you had how many? 6 other pieces?
Yes, they're all. I do a series of balls. Well, I do a lot on polyhedrons. I love polyhedrons and balls in particular. So the series I did there are all native except one are all native wildflowers of the hills, Perth Hills area, and one is of everlasting daisies. And so I use multiple different mediums on those because it's either a textural element or some kind of literal element that has to translate in my head somehow.
Yes.
So
okay.
I do that. I work with all sorts of mediums, literally. Whatever to me in the best way will illustrate what I'm trying to do is the medium I'll use. So I don't stick to any particular techniques or mediums. And I actually find it quite confusing when people call things like basketry or knitting or crocheting. To me, they're all just knotting fibres with or without an implement. And so I don't sort of differentiate between genres or techniques or anything like that.
Okay, yeah.
So
it sounds very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing those bits, Ryan. They'll be good.
Yeah, well, I hope people like them. There's no point making things if people don't like them.
Yeah, well, you do kind of need an audience, don't you? You do want somebody to make the things for. I think that's
also. I'm not really internally driven. I actually spend a huge amount of my time doing music, and many other things, advocating for people. And so unless somebody gives me like an opportunity to participate or something, I actually don't make art, and I don't play music unless I'm invited to play. So for me, it's sort of, I'm externally driven, so I get a choice of doing a great many different things. But I do like to be included, because I live in quite an isolated world, and I don't really know how to interact with people particularly well without something to aim for and something in common. Yes. Normal personal relationships are not something I'm particularly good with.
Okay.
So, once people get used to me, it's usually fine, but it takes people a while sometimes.
Yeah.
So I really do. I really appreciate the opportunity. And the other thing about the WAFTA committee that really impressed me, particularly, I mean, I probably know most of them, but particularly Pauline White, Joe Franco, Julia Sutton, and then Belinda Kay, because there are certain issues that I have real problems with, and they've actually facilitated those difficulties for me. So it actually makes it easier for me to participate, and that doesn't always happen. A lot of people, there's too much ego and politics involved, and I can't deal with that very well. So I am immensely grateful to these individuals, and I'm really happy to participate.
Lovely.
I'm really excited, and I'm excited to see how much, I've seen some of the work, but I'm sure it's all going to be pretty spectacular.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. I can just feel it. It's going to be so good. Okay, yes. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on, and I'll be putting all the little video clips together. And
thank you for inviting me. I was quite surprised and taken aback. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Okay.
I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just... Hi, Tanya.
Hi,
so
Iris.
This is Tanya Spencer, and she's going to talk about the work that she's got lined up for hanging by a thread. So Tanya.
Yes, Iris.
So tell me about a challenge that you've had while you've been working on this. Let me just move around. There we go.
Well, probably the biggest challenge I had was fitting into the size requirements, because I'm doing a streetscape. It's a whole block of houses and homes in our town, and I wanted them displayed on our ring lock fence, which comes from the farms, and so I sort of had to fit them into the 2 metres. So that was my biggest challenge, is how to make that work for me. I'm working a little bit differently to what I've done. I'm working more in a 2-dimensional way, and working with my embroideries. I've previously done the embroideries on metal panels, but this time I'm using a full transparent background, which I'm really, really enjoying working on because it's white.
Yeah. So, and tell us a bit, you were saying earlier about the history of the town, that you've been told that...
Well, I was talking to a fella in the cafe one day, and he said that there's a government report, he's a government worker, there's a government report that says that our town won't be here in 10 years, and that just took me back. I was quite, oh my God, what's this about, you know? So I asked him a bit more, and he said, well, they're making decisions for our services for our towns on this report. And it just blew me away, because our town is dependent on the farms are dependent on the town. It's a whole community that will be gone if it's not going to be here in 10 years, and I just didn't see how that could happen. But there are things happening with farms. Once upon a time, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 acres was a farm, and that was for a whole family. But now that's sort of gone to 7,000 to 20,000, just depending on, you know, the farms are all getting swallowed up by the next door neighbours, and also there's some corporates coming in. And I think that's where this report is pointing towards, that the farms will all be owned by corporates, which has great ramifications for our towns. Not in a good way. It means that services will go and people may not live there anymore. So it concerned me. So I thought I need to make a work about that, because I need to explore this.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Tanya. Okay, so welcome, Jane Stone. And we're interested in finding out, pardon me, what challenges you had with your hanging by a thread artwork.
I guess the biggest challenge was making such a large piece, 3 metres, and working out how I could actually make that in my small space. I ended up with small pieces of fabric which I printed, and then I was able to stitch them together to create the scale of work that I needed. And then I suppose after I'd done that, I thought, well, it's not actually doing anything for me, and I was going to just pack it all away. I thought I needed to add some colour, so I printed colour onto the pieces. I appliqued similar colour, I've stitched, but thinking about what was the story, what was my motivation, why am I making the piece. It started off with something that when I was living in Geraldton, and so I thought back, and the colours I were using were also the colours of Geraldton, and I suppose it started to make me think about the difficult time that I had there about, do I come home?
Was this when you were working there?
This is when I was working there. I on numerous occasions, I thought it's so easy just to come home, and I had to find a way to make peace with this environment that I found difficult. It was very windy, it was low shrubs, it was arid, I didn't know many people, but I loved the buildings, and I would visit the Anglican church there, which is probably a 1970s, such an inspiring building with stained glass that reached to the ceilings, just an amazing. I found a lot of solace in that building. They had beautiful handcrafted altar cloths, and it was all crafted by West Australian people. So my piece I suppose I started to think about where would my piece hang, what sort of place. So to me, my piece is for something like a church, and processional is the title. And once I had sorted all of these things out, I knew exactly where my piece would go.
Okay, so and how does it link to the theme of hanging by a thread?
Well, in a way, it was my own life, was my time there in my job. It was really, I suppose, tenuous that whether I would stay or not, because I honestly felt really homesick.
Okay.
And but I stayed because I changed my accommodation, and I got a lot happier. But it was really my own sense of who I am as a person that I worked out ways to be able to stay there.
Okay. So with the piece of work that you were doing, you resolved some of those kind of issues for yourself through making the work, is that right?
I think it was probably really, in hindsight, I sort of probably dealt with the emotion of going to a new place. I thought of refugees coming to a new place. How do they make peace with where they've come from to their new environment? So there were lots of things that I thought about in my piece. I thought of migration and refugees and how their lives put into turmoil. They're hanging by a thread. It was at the beginning of COVID. You know, there were lots of anxieties and things that were that came out as I was making. But to, I suppose, calm myself and to focus, I just thought at a time when I felt like my life itself was just hanging in the balance of did I come home, quit my job and come back to my family. And I thought many people don't have those choices. I had to learn somehow to overcome that to stay.
Okay. Thanks, Jane. Good.
Okay, so Joyce, welcome. Lovely to have you here in the coziness of your home. So, okay, so we'll launch right in. I'm interested to know what challenges. Well, actually, we've only got 5 or 6 minutes, so pick a major challenge that you had with your hanging by a thread work, and we'll take it from there. So tell me what was a problem.
I guess the major challenge was that it was the brief, which was the 3 meters long by a certain width, and then it was to be in muted colors. And I found trying to go muted colors was the biggest challenge for me, because I had envisaged something a lot more brighter and colorful. So I went to, I thought I'd work in Hessian, which was a medium that I hadn't worked in before, but it lent itself to being able to be hung from a height and have a bit of weight in it so that it would hang without sort of flapping around. Then I originally was going to do it based on coffee, because they're coffee Hessian bags. And then I had a bit of an epiphany, and it wasn't, because it wasn't working, and I decided to go back to the traditional use of Hessian in Australian culture, and thinking along the lines of the wagga, which is a bedding made with Hessian that they did in the early days. And then I thought that was a bit boring, and I actually went into thinking about the landscape that was that I wanted to depict, because the Hessian was already nice to work with as a landscape background. So I've ended up creating a piece that is pretty much looking down on the Australian landscape, but references the fact that we grid everything. Every bit of land is cut up into degrees and measurements, and even the ancient landscape that Australia is So I've tried to get bits of the landscape creeping through, but with it being gridded.
Yes.
If you get what I mean.
Yes, and you've got an interesting title. Yeah.
Yeah, the graticulation is a term that they use in prospecting.
Yes.
How when you apply for prospecting licenses, you have to put in the degrees of the graticulation, the graticulated country that you want to mine. So the mining, what happened was during the process of making this, Rio Tinto demolished an ancient cave system. And I was trying to find the references for it, the plot references for it, for their mining, but I couldn't find it. It's been actually wiped off. So you can't even find it. So
interesting.
Yeah, that was sort of where I was coming to. I guess I've overthought it a bit, but it looks quite interesting when you hang it up. The other challenge I had was I broke my ankle in the process. And so I've been able to set it up on my dining table to complete working on it, and it's worked really well. So
Great.
I'm sitting here at it right now.
Yes.
And I just quietly work away on sections of it. And yeah, hopefully it'll be finished before the exhibition. But it actually will never be finished. It's always at a finished state. So whatever I add is as it is.
Yes, and I suppose
COVID was a challenge.
Yes, yeah.
I found COVID was just the best thing that ever happened. It stopped all that procrastinating about, oh, I've got to do this, I have to do that. So I actually could spend all my time on it when I wanted to.
Yeah. Yes, I think a lot of people are finding that, or have found that after the initial sort of shock, it was, oh, I've actually got some time to do this. You know, I haven't got all these other demands. Yeah.
Well, you need to change it into a positive. So I think for us, it was a great positive.
Yeah, well done.
I found that with a lot of artists. Some of them have been completely stymied by it, by having all that time to work on their work, and yet others found it really liberating.
Yes.
I found I had to put myself to the task all the time, though.
Yeah, it doesn't actually sort of, I didn't find that it actually helped me get on with doing my piece of work. It was that I had more time in some ways, but in some other ways I had a lot more things to do. So, but it was just less in terms of meetings with people and going out and shopping and that kind of thing. So there was that time that was freed up, but I still had to make that a concerted effort to get on with it, and I've still got work to do on it. So
same.
Anyway,
I'm still working away at it.
But I can see how even with the theme of what you've chosen, it's kind of an ongoing thing. It's just, you know, it's that dynamic of the earth we live on, the planet, constantly moving. So the work, in some ways, the work's never finished.
We keep trying to parcel it up, and when you go back to First Nation people, it was a whole. It wasn't sectioned up, and that's what we've come and done is grid it, and even the Hessian is a gridding. You know, it's the weave creates a grid. So I kind of think the difference between how First Nation people dealt with their country and they were part of it, whereas we keep parceling it up and selling it and buying it, and it's quite an interesting reference point.
Yes, yeah. Okay, well, Joyce, that's lovely. Thank you so much. And
more than welcome.
Yeah, so I'll be putting these pieces together, and then we can, you'll be getting them on the WAFTA, what do you call it, website.
Hi. Welcome, Kate Wheaton-Jones. Now, Kate, will you tell me about one thing that you had a challenge with your work?
The challenge started many months ago because I was going to do a piece in indigo dyeing, so it was going to be blue.
Right.
And I've made 3 organic vats, none of which worked very well. And so I threw my hands up in the air and gave up. And I did work with acid milling dyes in a earthy, rusty colour, which was probably the other colour palette I would have used anyway. And I did some onion dyeing and shibori processes and started playing from there.
It's a stunning piece of work.
The start was pretty horrible.
Yeah. Oh, it's turning out beautiful. I mean, have you actually finished it yet? Or
I have finished
you have
it.
now?
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah, had to get that done.
Well, I had a peek. I had a sneak preview, so thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
And looking forward to seeing it hanging up.
Yeah, it'll be a good show.
It will. Yeah, it'll be amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Kate.
Okay, pleasure. See.